The Canoly C16 is good, and that's a problem. This is probably your first juicer, and I get it. You're looking for something that's good enough, something that works, something that saves you $400. You want someone to tell you that the Canoly C16 is just as good as the Nama J2. I'm not gonna do that. In this Canoly C16 review, I'll show you if this juicer works on a budget or if good enough turns out to be a $200 mistake. Let's start with the parts. The Canoly C16 comes with a hopper, juicing chamber, juice strainer, sorbet strainer, auger, motor base, 2 pulp containers, a sieve, and a cleaning brush. Something that turned me off was the parts had this weird kind of chemical smell to them, but after a while it went away. What blew my mind was how similar these parts were to the Nama J2. The hopper looks almost identical to the J2, the juicing chamber looks almost identical to the J2, and the design sort of looks like the J2. Even the logo looks exactly like the Nama one, but with a C instead of an N. If I didn't know any better, I'd think their entire business is copying Nama and undercutting them. But maybe that's actually a good thing. If you can get the same quality and performance as the J2 for a third of the cost, that'd be amazing. But there's just one thing that worries me. The strainer on the left is from the J2 and the strainer on the right is from the C16. Notice anything different about these? The Canoly strainer is like 80% plastic and only 20% stainless steel. The J2 has smaller holes that press out juice, while the Canoly has these giant holes on top. The J2 also has a set of wipers that help sweep more juice out of the machine, and the Canoly doesn't. It sounds like I'm sweating the small details, but these might actually have a huge impact on yield and pulp, but we'll test that out later. By the way, if you decide you want to buy the Canoly C16, I'll update the link in the description with the best discount on the internet. Now, what good is your juicer if it's a hassle to put together? You probably won't get much use out of it. For the Canoly C16, the juicing chamber goes on the motor, then the strainer, then the auger, and the hopper twists on. From start to finish, you can put it together in about 24 seconds. And honestly, that's about as simple as the J2 or any other standard machine. But none of this really matters without this next part. The true test is to make some juice with the C16 and see how it does. How dry is the pulp? What's the yield? And does the juice come out kind of thick? To find out, we'll stick to one simple recipe from my juicing ebook. Link in the description if you want to check that out. The ingredients are apple, spinach, celery, lemon, and cucumber. I loaded up each ingredient in the hopper. I even used a whole apple to test out the power and the torque of the C16. Close the lid, flick the switch. Now, the hopper was making light work of those bottom ingredients, but the whole apple on the top was not budging. Juice was slowly gushing out. After about 5 minutes of standing there, the hopper was really struggling with that whole apple. You can see it just spin around and around, not really doing much. After a while, it finally processed, but then I started seeing chunks of produce just spin around the blade. I had to lift the lid and push it into the juicing chamber. This wasn't exactly the hands-free, loaded and walk away experience I had pictured. At the end, there was still some celery just getting swept in a circle, not moving. Here's how much celery was left in the hopper. It was at that moment I knew that this thing was clogged, and when I took it apart, you're not gonna believe what I saw. But before I show you, let's talk about a couple things that might make the C16 worth the $200 investment. First, you're watching this either because you're on a budget or you're hesitant to spend a lot of money on your first juicer. The Canoly C16 starts at around $200. Considering high-end machines can be $700, the C16 could save you a lot of money. Now, most cheap juicers have terrible build quality, and I think that this is slightly better and closer to what you get with a higher-end machine. I will say the juice quality was decent and it tasted pretty good. But after using it for a while, I'm not in love with the C16, and for a certain type of person, it might get the job done. But remember, just because something's cheap doesn't always make it the right choice. I'll share with you later who I think it's for. Second, there's a big difference between what you pay versus what you get. The Canoly C16 has a 250-watt motor, which seems pretty impressive. The hopper is almost identical to the J2, although it's a bit flimsy. It comes with a sorbet strainer and a smoothie strainer, but I won't lie, the parts feel cheap, and just look at the juice strainer and the sieve, they're mostly made of cheap plastic. With that considered, for $200, it does seem like a decent value, but now you're probably thinking there's gotta be a catch, right? Well, yeah, there almost always is. There are 3 things every person needs to consider before buying the C16. And if you ignore these, you could wind up making a $200 mistake. You ever hear the saying, you could put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig? Everything about the Canoly screams Nama J2 dupe, but no matter how hard they try to copy the J2, it will never be the J2, especially with this one thing. After drinking my juice from earlier, I noticed it was different from what I was used to. So I took out a sieve and poured it into a glass, and there was too much pulp. It felt like I was drinking a thicker juice, almost like the bottom was kind of like this baby food consistency. It felt a far cry from the low pulp juice I was used to with the Nam J2. Here's the second thing nobody talks about that could cost you hundreds over the lifetime of this machine. Whenever you get a juicer, one way you can tell if it's being efficient or not is with the squeeze test. I took the pulp from the C16, gave it a good squeeze, and some drops came gushing out. That didn't surprise me. Even juicers like the Nam J2 aren't perfect, and you'll still get some drops, especially with things like celery. But what shocked me was when I took apart the cannoli. I saw celery stuck on the bottom of the hopper, which wasn't that bad. But then the auger had loads of celery jammed around it too. But this is what really shocked me. I pulled out the strainer and there was just a giant mess of wet pulp in the shape of a fruitcake. And just think about how wasteful that is. You could be wasting hundreds of dollars on groceries during the lifetime of this machine. Money that you could have used to buy the J2 if that's the machine you really wanted. So the Canoly C16 has yield problems. Now, nobody likes to waste money, and there's actually another way you could do it with this machine. After doing some research, I saw many reviews like this. The juicer stopped working after less than a year. They didn't care to look into the issue. They barely spoke English. After fighting back and forth with them, the only thing he was able to get was a $20 Amazon gift card. He said the price was reasonable and he had high hopes. It looks like he got sucked in just by looking at the price and not taking into account all these other factors I just showed you. And this isn't anything new. I've been burnt before too. I've tested over 12 juicers, including the cheap ones from Amazon, and one thing these always have in common is they break easily and they have terrible customer service because the people who make them are these sketchy companies based in China looking to make a quick buck. The dead giveaway is when you see images on their website with broken English like "love she" in the healthiest way. The problem with the cannoli is that it's just good enough to suck you in. So don't whip out your credit card. Instead, watch this video where I show you the difference between the Nam J2 and all the best budget juicers on the market, including the cannoli. And I'll even show you a hack no one talks about to get the J2 up front for just 86 bucks.